Shattering read Chapter 16. Wait State. They had waited for days out in the countryside, but got bored with the trees and moved to the beach. Vita had never remembered feeling such a state of confusion. She felt locked up even though they had the world before them. They had everything ready for their plan of attack, and their tech kept them safe from prying eyes. They had been plastered all over the news as some kind of terrorist organization, but she thought that was laughable. How could two people constitute an organization? Deep down, she knew hearing her name associated with terrorist was downright disheartening. She hadn't had her chance to speak yet. She would get reconciliation. She and Luck were nestled in a hammock watching the waves. Her consistent foot movement disrupted their peace, so she decided to get up and go on a walk to disperse the nervousness. Tomorrow was the big day. They had seen that groups had decided to go with group outfits for their political parties, which made it easy for them to whip up outfits to blend in. Those now hung in the tent. Impatient didn't even begin to cover how she felt, like a tiger trapped in a small metal cage left to pace over the same sentences over and over. They could leave and be safe. That would just leave thousands in a permanent state of turmoil with no way out. She didn't know if she could live with herself if she didn't at least try. That try was tomorrow night. She screamed and kicked at the sand, but it offered nothing except fresh road rash against her bare feet. She had never been to the beach before this, and she wasn't sure if she loved it. The ocean had a call to it, much like the void she chose to not peer into every second of every day. This place was just a constant reminder of that inner cry. And there were sand fleas. She shook herself out and continued her march, now more annoyed by her itchy feet than anything else. She found a rock that was farther up the beach and lay down on its smooth, clean surface. She was feeling nauseated from too many emotions and not having any true alone time. The rock was warm from the sun. Another added nicety from Luck's personally made wardrobe was the temperature regulation and sun protection. She did not understand his explanation, but in the protection, the cast that kept her invisible to Talbot's machinery somehow also canceled out the sunburns, much to her delight. She closed her eyes and permitted herself to doze, ears full of the push and pull of waves, and nose filled with the scent of ocean detritus. She and her sister were running towards a little stream in the park that was very much stylized after a traditional Japanese garden. Vita picked up a rock and tossed it towards the water. No! Her sister Jessica, slightly larger than her, tackled her, bringing her to the ground with a loud crunch. Vita's aim was so poor she had missed the water anyway. They wrestled for a minute before her sister managed to say, "You need to go look before you throw, Dumby." Her sister jumped off her, then ran the rest of the way downstream, to where the water gathered at a large pool. Vita followed slowly, clutching her side, and sat next to her sister. "Whoa!" fell out of Vita's mouth in astonishment at the amount of life in the pool. A mass of fish swam in an infinite circle. Lily pads, frogs, and tadpoles occupied the areas with minimal fish activity, and bugs that looked like fairies floated above the water, caught in glimmering sunlight dispersed by flowering trees above. This was more perfect than the actual moment had been. She examined her sister, trying to keep herself from crying at the almost surreal experience. It was as if she could see every pore on her sister's face, and yet she could see through her. If she focused on a spot for too long, it was like she wasn't there at all, but just consisted of swirling, semi-transparent, opalescent color that shifted between the child from the memory to the woman she might have been had she made it further than her teenage years. Her sister looked back, her vibrant blue eyes crackling with energy, the only thing that remained a constant. Vita looked down when she felt the whisper of a thought on her hand. Her sister was placing the rock she had thrown back into her palms. Save it for the right moment. Little pebbles can have a big impact when used properly. Her sister beamed. I heard there was a shrine with a strange duck monster hidden here. Want to go search for it? I heard it was more like a turtle. Vita pocketed the polished piece of maroon and honey agate, and they ran off. She opened her eyes, not realizing she had said the last part out loud. What's more like a turtle? Luck asked, not tearing his eyes away from her. She startled, not realizing he had followed her and was watching her nap. A kappa. But really it's like both, she sighed, stretching and sitting up, wiping the large tear from her face, knowing Luck saw it. She stood up and reached for his help down off the boulder, then walked to their cozy spot beneath the trees. What else is it compared to? Luck asked, just to continue with his obnoxious conversation. A duck. She squatted into the tent and rummaged around for her bag of rocks. It was buried at the very bottom of her bag. She retrieved it and sat on her knees between the couch and the low coffee table. There was a thin, circular, handmade mat that was a handkerchief from some great-grandmother she had never met. It laid across the tabletop and dumped out across a collection of rocks. Picking up that agate piece she and her sister had tossed around so long ago and examining its flaws closely. Is it something we should be afraid of encountering? Luck asked, almost sheepishly, as he moved about to fix them tea and cookies. Absolutely not, she replied with an empty laugh, palming the stone from her memory and tucking the rest away. Once they were secured in her bag, she sought out Faust's journal and returned to the couch. Going through her dad's personal thoughts made him comparable to a kappa. She had not been aware of most of his life's work, and she was unsure if he had been more of a snapping turtle or a duck. His journal did little to quiet the roar of frustration in her head about her situation, because it shed light on the fact that their government frequently turned their back on what was right for what was easy. Faust really had done a good job of keeping his mouth shut for someone who groused so much, if his accounts were true. She was reading one page about the Entomo network and false advertising when Luck plopped next to her after setting her tea on the table. The visual she had just had was not quite true to what had actually happened. The trees and flowers had not been in bloom when that moment had occurred. It hadn't been the right season. She moved the piece of agate around in her left hand, thinking back to the actual memory in the park. It was much duller and somehow felt less real than the dream her mind just built over the core memory. You have the creator of the Entomo Network's journal. I can't pronounce his name, Vita trailed off, only to be caught by Luck. His name was Ant, 'cause no one could get the middle, he stated coolly, like he had waited his whole life to share this tidbit of information with someone and actually have them hear it. Vita did her best not to look annoyed by his random trivia. Did he detail what kind of power source it ran on? She had a feeling they had been lied to. There were notes of early failures in the system. Faust and others had had to go and retrieve something he had been extraordinarily vague about, even though it seemed like a huge deal. Vita had never heard a word about it, but Luck, laughing at her question, made her suspicion harden. The green energy bullshit, he hummed as he appreciated her reaction. It is green if it comes in contact with the air, he mused. What? She balked. Plutonium. Element 94. He wiggled his fingers with flair for show, then got a little more serious. He found a way to severely condense the nuclear process. Luck shrugged. So it's not environmentally friendly? The very foundation of their great civilization was a lie. She felt as if she had always known. To be fair, the way he set it up was phenomenal. And it doesn't really require maintenance. He shook his head. Why are you asking? She didn't answer, but opened Faust's journal to the start of the mystery material they had to search for. He mentioned they were at a town near a volcano bit, which, as Luck pointed out, would make sense for plutonium. Just filling in more gaps, she admitted, still processing the new information. Oddly, this massive betrayal of social trust helped her feel like she was seeing for the first time. She rolled the stone around in her hand, thinking back to the dream and her sister. He noticed the way she seemed to fade back into the background. "So what is bothering you?" He pointed at the stone in her palm so she couldn't avoid the source of his concern. She passed the rock over to him to inspect it. "This was from my sister, the one that was put in the program. She's the whole reason I got started in the surrogacy offices anyway." She didn't smile as she explained. "I wanted to be closer to my sister after she died, and this seemed like a way that she could be reborn and useful. I was grief-stricken when they asked me about the program. Had I known about their lie, I would have never agreed to it. They swore the surrogates would be brain dead, just vessels." She trailed off, then found her gumption again. "I had a dream of a memory, and it felt as if she was really there for a moment." The words wouldn't come out for a moment, which wasn't an issue, because luck took over. "You need to trust that," he encouraged. "Trust what?" She truly didn't get it. To her, the esoteric was for suckers. It stemmed from her own family's beliefs, and had been reinforced by Faust. "That your sister came to find you, to inspire you," he verbally nudged. She squinted, not wanting to offend him, but also not believing it. He understood without her saying anything. "I was the same way for a very long time, but both my brother and mother have made themselves known after they departed." "How do you mean?" she asked nicely. "The day before I did my big job that changed everything, I woke up and swore I smelled her, and it felt like she was sitting on the end of my bed and stroking my ankles like when I was a kid, and she was tucking me in after a pep talk. I was so scared to do something so large, that was so frowned upon by the people with all the power, that before I fell asleep, I had decided to quit. I had strange nightmares that would not stay on topic for very long, but the entire time my mother was in the background, her eyes judging me for backing down." He rolled the just about grape-sized stone between his fingers, and then tossed it back to her. She caught it clumsily, asking, "What makes you sure it's not just a psychological trick? Responses from your body's muscle memory in a time of need." She was listening, but it was not a topic she navigated easily. "How do you believe in that stuff and not feel crazy? Does it matter?" His eyebrows were raised in a slight frown as he watched her struggle over concepts. "Even if the spirit is just made up in your brain, does it matter if it gets the job done? That moment or memory was so deeply ingrained from a time of love, then it tickled your brain into actually feeling as if the person was there. If it can inspire you to move mountains, you should use that experience, whether you believe it or not, because if not, your subconscious is giving you a glance at what is important to you." Vida thought of the perfection in the moment that had not been a perfect moment in the dream, the shifting colors of light, the familiar presence with her smile, not just as her smile had been, the weird shift between youth and that which she had never been in more than a lab made sense. Those moments make little to no sense, but they offer uncertain clarity of path in life. They are not something that happens often, and are to be coveted, not shamed, but reflected upon. I often find something life-altering happens after such an occurrence. The droplets of red in the stone had caught her attention while he was talking, and, while looking at them, she hadn't noticed he had left the tent until the space had been silent for a minute. Culture was not kind when it came to listening to spiritual things. The New Earth benediction had aspects of spirituality, but they practically neglected the principle for fast-paced lives. What place is there for the esoteric when time matters now for the sake of an argument? She hated theology, yet today it felt as if she could not escape it, not for Jessica's sake. Time was running out until the event, and the pressure was mounting. All she could do was hope that tomorrow went well, and she wasn't feeling fortunate. She set the stone down on top of Faust's journal and went to purge their cupboards of snacks for consumption. All Vida and Luck planned on doing was taking over all the monitors when it was Talbot's turn to speak, and playing the video to defame his socially pious character. They didn't know how it would end. They were sure they could get through mostly undetected, but causing a scene on one of the busiest social days of the year was not going to go unnoticed, especially with a man who had secret police behind him. She sighed, thoughts wandering in circles before Luck popped back into the tent. "You were looking for a new home," she started. "Is Aphthonia your ideal?" She wanted to hear his opinion about the place. She was opening a box of fresh crackers and planned on eating the whole thing. "Ideal? No," he said. "But I wouldn't even begin to know what an ideal living situation would be. Something is always wrong or needs something to be fixed somewhere, right?" She shrugged and nodded. "Let's just see how tomorrow goes," Luck added. They spent the rest of the evening trying not to think about much of anything. Thank you so much for listening to Chapter 16 of Shattering Red. If you've liked what you've heard so far, please be sure to like, subscribe, or whatever it is that you do to make sure that you follow the next part of this story. If you find that you cannot wait for the rest of it to come out, please be sure to check the Amazon link below, or please be sure to check any major online retail bookseller. I'll include a link to my Kofi account in case you don't want to purchase the book but would like to support me. Thanks so much. Take care.